Hey, welcome to Goals, Grit, and Some Woo-Woo Shit. I'm your host, Una Duncan, and today we are talking to Brigitte Gemme, the author of Flow in the Kitchen. She wants to show us how we can make home cooking stress-free, but it's not because she's going to give us a bunch of simple recipes. In fact, Brigitte is kind of against recipes and cookbooks in general. Instead, she's all about the mindset of cooking, and she kind of kicked my butt on this, I'm not going to lie. She uses her sociology background to show why we often feel undervalued and resentment towards cooking and how we can switch this around to feeling flow in the kitchen. If you have a goal of not hating cooking, you will love this episode.
It's time to get your head out of your ass and start creating a life of no regrets. Whether you want to lose weight, get rich, or manifest a hot threesome on the beach, you're gonna want to turn this up. This is Goals, Grit, and Some Woo-Woo Shit with your host, best-selling author and professional butt kicker, Una Duncan.
Oh my goodness, Brigitte, I am so excited for this chat because I've been spending the last few days reading your book, which I was so thrilled to get an advanced copy of it. I think it actually came out yesterday. Am I right?
It did. It was the first official day of the book's public life.
Oh my gosh, congratulations. So can you tell people a little bit about what it is that you do?
Sure. I decide what's for dinner for people. Somebody's got to do it.
Dude, that is such a great one-liner because I was immediately like, yes, someone else figure that out for me.
Please. I remember when I was a kid, old enough to have an opinion about what dinner is. My mom and my parents had a business at home. We lived on a farm, and my mom was so busy, but she was always cooking for us anyway. And she would come in for air in the house, sometime around 4:00 and say, okay, you guys, what do you want for dinner? And everybody would scamper away. And I totally feel her pain. And that's why I started this as a way to atone for running away when she was asking those questions in the past. And so that's the main thing I do is I offer a meal planning service that's all whole foods, plant-based, or mostly whole foods. For me, pasta is acceptable. Mm-hmm. And I run monthly workshops about nutrition, cooking topics, and also the mindset of cooking. I work at helping people find joy, gratitude, and mindfulness in the practice of cooking. It's not just about, getting food in mouths. There can be a lot more happening about cooking. So that's a really big part of my life now.
Okay, so this is what fascinated me so much about your book, because you really do talk about the mindset. And it wasn't until I read your book that I realized how blocked my mindset was about cooking and food prep. And as soon as I read it, it seemed so obvious. All the things I tell people about exercising, you were telling me about cooking, because I am definitely one of these people who's like, I hate cooking. So I wanted to start off, you were obviously a big fan of cooking. And I wanted you to kind of just convince me a little bit about why we should cook. Are we just going under the assumption that if we don't cook at home, then we're not going to eat healthy enough? Is that the basic reason, or is there any kind of deeper spiritual something that you want to convince me on here?
I am profoundly and deeply convinced that it is so profoundly necessary. And I could, I guess, farm that out to someone else, but it would not be up to what I think is really essential. I became passionate about that for a few reasons, but one of them increasingly for me has become health. In 2020, I lost my father to a prolonged downhill, awful struggle with dementia. And that really brought home to me how our lifetime habits have a big impact on our life in the long term, and we may not think about that a whole lot when we're in our 20s and even in our 30s. And when I became fully plant-based in my mid-30s, I was pretty healthy. It's not like I experienced, a body transformation, that my health issues disappeared, because I didn't have health issues. But when I see the things that happen later in life, and sure, eating a plant-based diet is not a silver bullet, but it does reduce a lot of risks, statistically speaking, right? And I don't want to put myself there. So that's definitely a huge motivation for me today. And the food is, my husband's a doctor, and often we hear physicians, with all due respect, that tell their patients, oh, it doesn't matter what you eat.
Yeah.
How are you out of your mind?
Yeah.
How can you possibly think this? You are physically what you eat. And some people don't really care about that. And so they maybe shouldn't be in charge of cooking.
Well,
but
definitely.
I care.
Yeah. And I care too. You do not have to sell me on healthy food. I'm totally with you on this, as you know. But I'm a little less convinced that I have to cook it. This is what I want your help with. Like, is there a reason that I have to cook that food?
But I mean, if you have endless money, right? Mm-hmm. Which, I mean, some people do.
Sure.
You can hire maybe someone. It will take you quite a while to find the right person, but you can hire someone who will cook food exactly to your specifications. And they will become a friend and a confidant, and they will know how you feel and what you need, and they will cook just the right thing for you, and they will have a relationship with you, so they will make sure that the food is good, right?
But you're saying like a restaurant won't do that, getting takeout won't do that, even if it's kind of pseudo-healthy takeout or pseudo-healthy prepared foods. You're like, there's something to the intimacy of preparing food with love.
Yes, it's perhaps a classic Buddhist thing, even that, you know, the love you put in the food continues into the food. But I mean, like, think of the working conditions in restaurants. Mm-hmm. I mean, people are hardly scraping by. They're there to do their job, but they're not there to put the love in the food necessarily. Right, the other thing we have to realize is that all the companies that sell food to us, for the vast majority of them, I mean, they want us to come back. And they want to hook us onto food that makes us feel like, whoa, this is good, right?
Sugar, salt,
and how do you achieve that? A lot of salt, a lot of added fats, a lot of added sugars. And those are not the things that are statistically proven to help us have a long, happy life.
Right.
And there are out there some exceptions. There are companies that are working hard at making foods that are a lot healthier, that have no SOS, you know, no added oil, sugar, salt. My experience has been that they're not great. I think I can do better at home, and I think it can also be cheaper to do it myself. And there's also a great satisfaction and empowerment when you take control of your food and you feed yourself the food you've made, even if it's really simple, like soup. You're like, I did this. Yeah. And it's so satisfying. So it's worth a shot.
Yes. Okay. So you are totally pro cooking, but one thing I thought was interesting is you are anti cookbooks.
Yeah.
Tell us about
embarrassing.
And you got the cookbooks behind you. But here's some of the things that I thought was really interesting. You went on to say at one point that consuming all these beautifully glossy photos of the perfectly arranged fork and the, like, you know, herbs on the side and blah, 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 like all this food porn, you actually you don't say this directly, but you sort of hint that consuming all this food porn is as bad for our home cooking life as consuming sex porn would be for our sex life, in that it just gives us a completely unrealistic idea of what we should be expecting of ourselves. Hey, dude, if you are enjoying this episode and you have a friend that you think might also benefit from this information, please share it with them. That helps my podcast so much, and it's going to help your friend. Share the love. Thanks so much.
I think so. I mean, there's conflicted studies about actual porn, you know.
Yeah, okay.
Porn,
you don't have to be an expert on that. That's okay.
As a sociologist, you know, I don't want to commit here.
Right.
But clearly, as we scroll through like Instagram, beautifully staged photos, and these reflections came to me as a food blogger. I was looking at ways to improve my food photography, right? Mm-hmm. Because when I was wondering what is going to happen with my business, where's this going? Well, the pull to publish recipes with really nice photos is huge. That's how you succeed on Pinterest. That's how you succeed on Instagram, is to show these beautiful pictures. And being a bit of a rebel, and I approached those food photography classes with a bit of a critical eye and thinking, well, that's not true. Like, why do you show this to people? Right. Like, how is this helping people create a realistic game plan for their home cooking? Mm-hmm. And also, I had this roommate 30 years ago. It was quite amusing. You would cook with her, and it was, I don't know, spaghetti sauce, something, right? And smoked paprika. I don't have smoked paprika. That's it.
I give up. There's no way this is going to happen.
Abort, beef is the end of the cooking. But I think having these instructions, having everything fed to us in a certain order that we're supposed to do, it, in a way, it puts us on autopilot. And that's how I feel about exercise. I'm happy, just tell me what to do, right? And I'll do it. But for cooking, I don't think it's a sustainable way to go, that you constantly have to be told what to do, because maybe your fridge won't fit the specifications of the recipe. Maybe your family is allergic to some things, or you just don't have the exact time to cook the exact thing. But so it creates a despondency to the recipe, a dependency, and it stifles our capacity to learn. When you're doing your own thing and paying attention, because something you might mention later, but there's a whole chapter in the book about leaving your phone outside of the kitchen. And I love having a phone if it's like to listen to a podcast or listen to music or talk to your mom, maybe, although talking to your mom might be tricky in terms of attention. But when we're focused on what we're doing, then we can learn. We can observe what goes in. We observe what comes out. We can learn to cook by sound. That's something that really impresses my husband. Like, I'm cooking, I'm chopping veggies, and I'm like, I know that there's this sound coming out of this skillet. It means, like, you can hear when I say all those things, like, I like to cook. Like, don't think I like to cook. But I just do it a lot. But you can hear when there's less liquid in the skillet, right? The sound changes, and that maybe means it's time to add the next vegetable. And but if you're, responding to stuff on social media at the same time, and I mean, there's a lot of distractions asking for our attention anyway. So if we add on top of that the phone, because by the way, we're trying to escape because, we don't like cooking, right? But then we don't get to learn. And that's why I really encourage people to have this experimental approach to cooking. But you have to accept that it might be more simple as you get started. As opposed to, again, those glossy, beautiful photos that have like multi-step recipes with like, oh, by the way, go back to page 42.
and make the sauce that has 12 different ingredients. And
exactly.
Forget it.
So if you might start with a simple thing like making soup. Soup is very forgiving and so satisfying. But you start with making soup, and then maybe you start with just having beans with some seasonings.
Well, actually, I'm going to hold you there because you do mention there's 5 recipes that people need to know and only 5. Yes. So I want to ask you about that. But first, I just wanted to go back to the idea of being present. I really liked how, for example, you said, don't cook the rice, or I think, don't cook the quinoa for the amount that it says in the package. Cook it for a bit and then test it. Really, it's up to you to test whether the quinoa is done, not what it says in the package. Or you say, if you get stuck, sit there and think, what do I want this meal to look like? What do I want? Don't check Pinterest. Think about it. And I love you keep the refrain throughout the book is, you know more than you think you do about cooking. You have been eating your whole life. And I was like, oh my gosh, I really loved it. And I also want to ask you, you mentioned your background in sociology, and you said that you use this background to shed light on why we feel so undervalued when we cook. Can you talk about that?
Yes. I think recently I've been also reading, having a tween girl, tween daughter. I've been reading a little bit about media and what kind of movies we pitch to girls and boys. And for example, let's take a little detour from cooking here, rom-com kind of movies, chick flicks, right?
Yeah, I love those.
Yes, I love them too, right? I really enjoy them. But that's not first of all, it's not highbrow, but it's also somehow perceived as less than more, let's say, fantasy or more like action-oriented thing. Oh, rom-com, and in the same way, and I think largely because it's feminine. And what? I think relationships are pretty darn important. Maybe more than shooting aliens.
Maybe. The same. Maybe more relevant. Yeah.
So in the same way, I think we've largely come to absorb these ideas that the non-remunerated activities of life, like caring for other people, a big part of which is cooking, like those things are not important. Right, those are the things that moms do, right?
Yeah.
That we take for granted. And they're not activities that are valued in society unless they're done by somebody else, like a restaurant or, fresh prep. What a genius idea, right? I mean, I'm not, knocking it, but it becomes a genius idea when it's made into a company.
Right, when it's commodified.
Yeah, and when somebody, and when there's an exchange of money in the process, and then somebody makes profit and the shareholders are happy, right? Which is not, it's conversation for another day. But
when it's just mom putting dinner on the table, you're like, yeah, well, that's just moms do.
Right? Exactly. And I think we've come to absorb and believe that to be the truth. And we've knocked down the value of cooking, the value of making food for others, the value of caring for children, for example, because they're feminine activities that moms do. And I shouldn't be caught enjoying that stuff unless it's like a chef level, cooking that's, really fancy and style in a restaurant, and it gives you Michelin stars. And in French, there's different words, for example, for a cook, a male cook and a female cook, a cuisinière is, on the one hand, it's the stove, and it's the wife, or the mom cooking at home. A cuisinier is like, it's a chef.
Oh, an exalted position.
Nobody will think of a cuisinier as just somebody who cooks dinner for people 7 days a week in their house.
It's an artist.
And it's the same thing for like a tailor. If it's a woman, the word means like just somebody who fixes the hem of your pants.
Right.
And if it's the male tailor, it's like Christian Dior, And so we've absorbed all of these ideas, and it is not true. We've just said it. Your body is made of what you eat. So what mom feeds you is what's most important. And if your mom, there might be a mom or two listening, take pride in that. It's such a power that we have to shape our lives and those of other people around us. We have to get into that power and become our own superheroes.
I love this so much. You know what? And it's the same with exercise, women's fitness, aerobics, Zumba. Those are always thought of as a little like
Jane
silly
Fonda.
and eye rolly, whereas like CrossFit and sports, like that's considered very serious business and worthy of a lot of, high fives. It's always so the true. Case. Hey, I just want to let you know that I'm starting a small mastermind group of a select group of people who want to work with me for 6 months to really focus and achieve a specific goal. We'll be coming together online to come up with your personalized action plan and even meeting in person. So if that sounds like something that might interest you, go to unaduncan.com/apply and check it out. So here's another thing I wanted to bring up. There's a chapter in your book, and I love it. You talk about 20 practices to help people embrace cooking. And can we talk about my 3 favorites?
Oh, yeah.
And because a lot of them are relevant to what you just said. The first one was, Mama, feed yourself first. Talk about that for a second.
Oh, yes. I ask a lot of women around me, including like my kids' friends' moms in the schoolyard, right? Because they come to me and they're like, oh, yeah, you're vegan, you're plant-based. My kid won't eat broccoli.
Yeah.
Can you help, right? And then I ask them, so, what do you want to eat? Like, what is your favorite food? And they look at me like deer in the headlight, like, what are you talking about? Like, who cares what I eat? And that is where I think it's so important that we give our head a shake and ask ourselves, what do I want to eat? What is my ideal food like? And it won't necessarily be a salad, as the stereotype, woman eating a salad, having orgasms. And
laughing. And
exactly.
Sometimes yogurt. Sometimes we're allowed to eat yogurt, but it's yogurt.
Yeah, low fat yogurt. Sure. It has to be. But, think about it. Think of what you like. And it doesn't mean that your family is going to eat that 7 days a week. But make sure that it shows up. Make sure that your aspirations are at the core of the meals. And if other people want to kick in and they want to have their aspirations be part of the meal planning, well, sure, bring them in. And it's worth it to engage our spouses, partners, children, roommates, whatever it is. into determining what it is that we eat. But if we don't have that feeling that we're going to take care of ourselves,
yeah,
what is this for? And how can we keep on filling other people's buckets if we're not filling our own first, right? And that's the same thing for exercise. Like, make time for exercise for yourself, because you're worth it. It's not even that you're worth it. It's
you need to live.
It has to be.
Yeah. But it's so funny. It does have to be. But my reaction when you're like, how to love cooking, I was like, what's this gonna be? And then the first one was like, make food that you want to eat. And I was like, whoa, the fact that seems so revolutionary to me that I was like, oh, that's crazy. And then the next one that I loved is that you said, wear an apron. And I have to say that which is really funny because I love costumes, but my initial reaction was like, that is a symbol of like female servitude over a hearth. And I balked at that a bit. Tell us a bit about wearing an apron.
It's like a superhero cape, but in the front, right? It's funny you mentioned our grandmothers, and again, see, like we think of old-fashioned female providers of food as something that we can't aspire to. And I mean, I'm all for having amazing careers and all that, right? But nourishing other people also matters. Right? I mean, there should be an award for that somewhere. But so it's funny you mentioned that, because my mother, as she was cleaning up her house recently, gave me some aprons that she had made my mom went to it was called the Institut Familial, the Family Institute, which was like a high school for future housewives.
Yes. Yeah. Family
and
studies.
She had quite the education. She didn't really become a housewife, but she made these aprons for herself, and they're very matronly. Aww. And they have pockets, Women want pockets. That's really the key.
Forever.
I find that when you put on the apron, and it's your favorite apron, you buy one that you like, you put it on, it's role playing, right? It's like you can get into a personality. You can kind of shake your head around. And it's the same thing as I'm a bit of a runner, putting your running shoes or putting your running clothes next to your bed, and you roll out of bed and into your, gym clothes or running clothes, and you're not going to bail.
Yeah.
Once you're there, like, oh, well, I guess I'm a runner. And what does a runner do? A runner runs. And so if you have an apron on, well, you're a cook, and a cook cooks. Yeah. And you feed other people. And maybe
it's like a ritual.
I think I need to start a fashion line of like inspirational aprons.
Yes, you do.
But it is a superhero cape. And
I love that.
Don it and move into the role.
I love this. Okay, so then my third one that I loved in this chapter, I want it. It's so good, you guys. Anyone listening, you have to go get this book to find all of the 20 ways that you will start to love cooking. I'm going to tell you my third favorite, which was high intensity interval cooking.
I knew you'd like that one.
Oh, I love that one. Tell us about it.
Yeah, basically it works for exercise, so it's got to work for cooking too. There's a lot of metaphors also in the book from running. Some of my early readers were like, what's a 5K? But I'm a runner, so it made more sense to me. But so high intensity intervals cooking means working really hard at cooking for a set period of time and then taking a break. And I get that from writing. I'm a lifelong procrastinator, but somehow I managed to get a PhD in 4 years. And that meant a lot of, and write a book. It meant a lot of sprints. And that's the only way I work. It's like at first I resent it, but I'm like, I'm just going to do it for 10 minutes. Yeah. And then I get a 1 minute break to surf the internet.
Yeah.
Do 2 push-ups or whatever, right? And it's this feeling that you're worried you're never going to get off the hook. Mm-hmm. You're worried when you start something that it will take forever, that it's going to be drudgery and a chore and awful. So when you say, okay, I do it for 10 minutes and then I get a 2-minute break, we're silly,
Yeah, I love it. No, it's a great mindset trick. It works in almost every area.
Totally. And somewhere in that same chapter, I think I say, if you fall off the bandwagon of cooking and prepping all this, it's usually a big mess, right? Mm-hmm. To get restarted, it's not like you can just get going again because maybe your kitchen is a mess and maybe you don't have groceries or anything. But just choose like one thing you can do for 5 minutes. And if after 5 minutes you need to stop, that's fine, right? but give yourself a chance to do it for 5 minutes. Take a break and think, do I want to keep going? Is it worth it? Okay, let's do another 5 minutes.
It's a conscious decision. No one's forcing you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
With cooking, it's a little trickier than with exercise, because if there's things that are hot and are ongoing, well, please remember to turn off the stove, right?
Yeah.
If you're going to step out of the kitchen. But just like promise yourself a break. I think that's the key here.
I love that. One thing that you said is that you said that cooking used to be more of a group activity. Can you explain that? Tell us a little bit about the history of that.
Yeah, I think so. I think in a lot of countries, even today, that are not living in individual boxes as we do in most of the West and North, of the global North, let's put it that way. A lot of people in farmer places also cook in open kitchens, right? That are often open to the neighborhood. There's people walking in and out.
Yeah.
You might see your neighbors as well. If we think historically, this is a party trick. My grandmother had 17 children.
Whoa.
And really quickly.
That's a lot of cooking.
That's a lot of cooking. That's a lot of children. But really quick, first of all, they had to rely on each other, sister-in-law with sister-in-law and neighbors. They had to work together to somehow survive, literally. And then after just a few years, the bigger kids were part of the family reproduction system, where they would care for the younger kids. They would also be participating in cooking. So we didn't have this isolation that we have today of one person cooking all by themselves and almost not talking about it with other people.
Yeah.
And what has been really transformative in my life, and what brings the most joy to me and all those practices, it's cooking with other people. And I've done it in person, which is always awesome, where we would get together and do a big batch cooking session, and we take each some of the food home. But also even doing it on Zoom is something I've really enjoyed this year with a bunch of clients. We get together every other Sunday and we cook and we chat, and it's, how's your husband? So-and-so had a sick child. Oh, you've had a new job. And so there's that neighborly approach. Of course, we're all over the map in like 5 different time zones.
Yeah.
But it brings a social aspect back. It also brings normalcy. Oh, there's other people cooking.
Are you all cooking the same meals?
When we do the cooking club, more or less. We more or less follow my meal plans, but some people will be just doing a version of it. They might be doing just like one soup and then they, check out. And other people will be staying for the whole 2 hours and doing 7 or 8 different prep steps. It really varies, but we all have something in common.
Yeah.
And we see that it's normal to spend time cooking. I mean, I hate saying that. Something that makes me feel really bad, that I felt really ambiguous about as I was writing the book, is that there's all these books, the best sellers. If you look at what's, the top sales on Amazon for the cookbooks, they're all like quick, easy, fast, simple right. I'm good with. But
we're just trying to erase it as much as possible. This podcast is made possible by Fit Feels Good, my online fitness and nutrition company. Here's what we do.
I have so many incredible benefits from the MFA program. It literally changed my life. I have the book, Healthy AF. I'm absolutely in love with my life now. I find that the healthy habits that I built are amazing to go back to. The benefits that you're going to see as a woman in your 40s plus are things you could have never imagined. The key, which I know Una talks about over and over again, is loving your body now, not what you're envisioning it to be.
Yes, get it out of the way. And a lot of the message of the book is like, yeah, you can make it quick, but you don't necessarily always want to. It depends on your specifications. I mean, you can't have it all at the same time, is what we say. And I talk about this idea also of project management, where, well, there's how much time you're going to invest, how much money and how much energy, and what are your specifications? What is it that you want out of the food? And if you want this really, really fancy food, I hate to break it to you, but
you're going to have to spend some time.
Quick and simple cookbooks, they work, but they're using for example, I don't know, like tomato sauce from a jar, right? Or there's quick vegan cookbooks that use vegan meat substitutes, which I don't have necessarily a problem with. I prefer not to eat them. But if you want to be quick, you have to do those shortcuts from, buying pre-made things.
Yeah.
It's a trade-off.
Yeah.
But I hate to say that. Like, it's not good marketing to tell people it's going to take time to cook. But you know what?
No one wants to hear that.
It does. It
true.
takes time to exercise. There's no such thing as a 5-minute workout that solves all your problems.
Well, you wouldn't know that by marketing, though, would you?
Exactly. And it's the same thing for cooking. And we have to be critical consumers of all the ads and also the content, because at the end of the day, blog posts and cookbooks are kind of an ad as well. They're content that's there to entertain us, but also the longer you look at a blog post, the more ads you see, right? And so if the content is appealing and there's nice photos and you're like, yeah, I can do this. And then the blogger gets more income, and I'm all for bloggers getting income.
Sure.
That's really important. I love some bloggers are really creative and coming up with
they deserve it.
New ingredients and stuff, right? But that's not what I can cook in my, Monday to Friday kitchen. On Saturday night, if I have nothing else to do, sure, I'll get into creating a feast with all these different recipes, and that'll be super fun. Right. But it's not a sustainable way for Monday to Friday.
So speaking of which, would you tell us about the only 5 recipes we need to know? Because I think this is such a great hook. Tell us, what are those 5 recipes?
Yeah. I'll tell you first where that came from really quickly, because when I started writing the meal plans, I was reading a lot of cookbooks, right? And I was and I realized as I was writing the recipes from the meal plan from one plan to the next, look, it's the same thing as last week. And then I was writing the recipe for, let's say, making a chili. And then 2 weeks later, I'd write a recipe for a curry. I'm like, actually, it's the same steps. Like, I'm somebody who likes efficiency. So I was thinking, what kind of shortcuts can I put into my computer to write this faster? It's different spices, it's different seasonings and this and that. But at the end of the day, like, it's the same structure. And sure, you could do it a little bit differently. You can do this step instead of this step first. But once you understand the structure, then you can port that same structure into creating more recipes. So what are those 5 recipes? It changes depending on the day you ask me. But roughly speaking, in the Western cooking canon of healthy vegan food, there's stir fries. Roughly things that go in the pan, it's hot and it's quick. There's soups and stews. It's easy, and stoops. Stoops are in between. So soups have more liquid, stews have generally less liquids, and stoop is often what happens to a soup after you leave it in the fridge. And if there's like a grain, it absorbs the liquid, and it's pretty thick, right? Yeah. It's great for lunches. There are roasted things or roasted foods. Some people like to call, bake sheet, one sheet dinner, pan
dinner or something.
Sheet pan dinners. There you go. Where you put a bunch of things on a sheet pan and you put them in the oven. There's sauces, but sauces are really kind of a variation on
the
soups and stews, right? Yeah. Often they're more blended. Sometimes I like to put pizza in there, but I like to say this over that as a form, and pizza is not that far from pasta, because you have pasta and then the sauce on top. Well, pizza is kind of a grain base that's made into a pie with ingredients on top that you haven't blended, unlike the ones that go in the stew, but there's still the ingredients on top.
Which could also be like a bowl.
Oh, yes. And salads and bowls would be the last category, with salads being mixed together and bowls being different piles of ingredients that don't touch so much. And I'm being a little facetious when I say that, but once you understand the structure of those, and of course, in a bowl, you might have a little bit of a stew, right? And so there's a bit of mix and match. And my approach to cooking is to decouple weeknight cooking from the weekend batch cooking. And that's where having that understanding of the different building blocks and how they're made helps you deconstruct how you want to eat in the week. And the stuff that I was saying earlier, those shortcuts that you could have bought from the store, for example, the tomato sauce, that's an easy one. Pasta sauce. Why do people buy pasta sauce? I hate buying pasta sauce, because then you need to take the jar the glass jar out for recycling.
Right.
That's too much work. I'd rather cook the sauce myself, right? Than not be stuck with a jar. And the jar makes me feel guilty.
Okay.
Glass is not really recyclable, right? So
Yeah.
I can make something and I save myself that trouble. So yeah, you can be creative about what the 5 recipes are.
But
and
basically,
at the end of the day, it's a lens to look at recipes through.
yes, but you're saying on weekends, if you make a grain, a protein, roast a bunch of veggies or chop up a bunch of veggies, then you can assemble these. That's what you do on the weekend. You make these building blocks.
Totally.
And then throughout the week, you can throw it all together for a stir fry. And then it becomes a stew. And then the next day it's a bowl. And you just add different kind of spices and ingredients and condiments to make it a different flavor profile. Something like that?
Absolutely. Yeah. One thing that I would add to the weekend prep, I call it my minimum viable prep.
Yeah.
There always has to be some kind of grain, and I like to vary it every other week. You know, we eat a lot of rice and pasta in the Western culture, but there's a lot of other grains.
Right. Get your amaranth on.
One. Exactly.
Yeah.
Amaranth is a complete protein. I didn't know that. Not that protein is anything I'm worried about, but I learned that this week.
Yeah.
But yes, definitely doing the grain, roasting vegetables, and definitely making a soup or stew. And if only because that is plug and play.
Yeah, instant meal.
Reheat and eat kind of dish that you will have your bases covered. If everything goes wrong, you can always pop that in the microwave.
Any hangry moment. You're never going to result to let's just get takeout because you've got that stew sitting there.
Because like eating plain quinoa, man, less appealing.
It's a tough sell at the end of the day.
Exactly. Even though it's a complete protein. And if you want to go deluxe, then it's nice to also prepare some kind of a dressing. Because I find, salads take a lot of time to make because there's all these different components to them. But if you've already prepared your greens, if you've already prepared your dressing, if you've already, say, roasted vegetables, as you mentioned, and you've got your grains, then it's pretty quick to pull it together. If you ask me to make a salad on a weeknight, and I mean, I work from home. I don't have that many excuses, but I don't feel like it.
Yeah, yeah.
But if the dressing is there, I open the fridge. I'm like, oh, okay, I got this.
Yeah, I love it. Brigitte, this has been such an awesome conversation, and I really, really genuinely loved your book. Please tell everybody where they can find your book, where they can learn more about what you do, how they can participate in one of your meal prep parties.
It would be wonderful to have you over and cook in my vegan family kitchen with me because I always like to have company. So anyone can go to veganfamilykitchen.com. It's not just for vegan and the cooking clubs. We don't handle animal products. On screen anyway, I hope.
Everyone's cooking up some fried chicken.
There's no vegan police,
screen.
Right? The vegan police is not involved. So veganfamilykitchen.com, you can learn all about what I do. There is a 5-day meal plan that people can download there to get started, to get a feel for what it is to decouple that prep from the weeknight cooking. And the book is easy to find. If you go to veganfamilykitchen.com, it says book there, and there's links to all the retailers. I encourage people to get it from their local bookstore because we need those, but it's also available to order as ebook or as a print book from Amazon.
Lovely. Thank you so much for chatting with me, and have a wonderful rest of your day.
Thank you for having me. It was awesome.
Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.